In the dim, ancient depths of the world, where light had never dared reach, a murmur grew, a stirring deep in the earth's heart, older than the gods, older than the sky. A presence coiled within the shadows, vast and immeasurably powerful, like a storm waiting to explode. From this churning void, Gaia, the primordial mother of all things, watched. Her children, the mighty Titans, had been defeated, bound and cast into Tartarus by the new rulers of the cosmos, the Olympian gods led by Zeus. And within her, an anger simmered, a need for vengeance as fierce as the life she had brought forth. She would unleash a being that could make even the immortal gods tremble. So Gaia descended, reaching deep into the pits of Tartarus, where creation's darkest forces pooled. And there she birthed her greatest weapon, Typhon. He was unlike anything before him, a towering being of elemental rage, his form shifting and monstrous. His legs were coiled serpents, writhing with venomous fury. His massive arms stretched to the stars, his 100 dragon-like head spewed fire and poison, and his voice shook mountains to their roots. Typhon was not just a creature, he was a force of unbound destruction, and his purpose was singular: to annihilate the gods of Olympus and claim the heavens for his mother, Gaia. News of Typhon's birth swept across Olympus like a deadly storm. The gods, in all their power and immortality, felt a tremor of fear they hadn't known since the Titans' fall. This new threat was beyond any they had ever faced, for Typhon was a being crafted to overthrow them, to tear down the very pillars of their dominion. For days, Olympus was silent, each god weighing their fate, knowing the battle ahead would decide the survival of their rule. Leading them was Zeus, the king of gods, wielder of the mighty thunderbolt. He had faced the Titans and carved the realm of Olympus from chaos, but even he felt the weight of Typhon's power like an ominous shadow. His lightning had bested all, yet would it withstand a creature born from the very heart of Tartarus? Beside him was Athena, goddess of wisdom and war strategy, whose clever mind had saved Olympus many times. She studied Typhon from afar, understanding that brute force alone would not fell this foe. Ares, god of war, sharpened his weapons, his eyes gleaming with bloodlust and anticipation of the chaos to come. Apollo, god of light and archery, prepared his golden bow, his face set in grim determination, his arrows blessed with lethal precision. Artemis, goddess of the hunt, stood ready with her twin arrows, vowing that her aim would strike true against this abomination. Poseidon, god of the seas, felt the tides stir and churn under Typhon's presence, as if the ocean itself knew fear. He raised his trident, prepared to unleash the full force of the oceans should the battle reach his domain. Even Hermes, the swift messenger, felt a chill as he delivered word to each god, his own heart racing with the knowledge that speed alone would not save them. Hera, queen of Olympus, summoned all her divine powers, her pride wounded at the very thought of an enemy daring to challenge the gods she ruled alongside Zeus. Together, they stood as the Pantheon, the last defense against a creature that wanted nothing less than to see them burn. And yet, in their moment of unity, the gods each held a secret dread. Typhon's strength was born from vengeance older than Olympus itself, a fury carved from the very bones of the earth. And so they waited, poised on the edge of an abyss, as Typhon's steps brought him closer to their mountain home, each step a tremor that shook both earth and sky. The cause of this war, they knew, was rooted in the ancient promise of power and the cycles of vengeance that had forged their world. Gaia's wrath was a fire that would not dim, and with Typhon as her champion, she intended to bring Olympus crumbling to its knees. But Zeus knew that if he fled, if he showed even a glimmer of hesitation, the gods would fall, and Typhon would usher in an age of shadow that no light could pierce. As Typhon's monstrous silhouette loomed ever closer, blotting out the sun itself, the gods steeled themselves. They would fight with every ounce of strength, every weapon, and every power they had claimed in their journey to the top. And as they took their places on the peak of Olympus, each god knew that the time had come to face the darkest reckoning of their immortal lives. Would Typhon's wrath drown the light of Olympus? Or would the gods prove unbreakable, their legacy etched in blood and thunder? The battle that would decide the fate of heaven and earth was about to begin.
Welcome back, legendary subscribers. It's always a thrill to have you here on this epic journey through myth and history. Your support means the world, and I'm grateful to share these legendary tales with such an incredible community. To all the new viewers joining us today, welcome. If you're fascinated by the clash of gods, the mysteries of ancient legends, or just love a good story, you're in the right place. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any future battles and tales. Don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. Your ideas and reactions make these stories even richer. Thank you all for being part of this epic journey. Now, let's continue.
And so, with Typhon's fiery eyes fixed upon the gleaming peak of Mount Olympus, the battle began. The heavens trembled, the earth quaked, and the sea recoiled, for the very elements sensed the clash between two forces, one determined to uphold the divine order and the other to unravel it. Typhon roared, his 100 heads hissing and spewing fire, each one emitting a different primal sound. Wolves snarling, lions roaring, serpents hissing. The cacophony of it all echoed across the land, as if nature itself were breaking apart. He raised his massive muscled arms, sending a boulder hurtling through the air with ease. With a terrifying impact, it shattered against the slopes of Olympus, and the gods felt the shock reverberate beneath their feet. At the forefront, Zeus raised his thunderbolt, his face a mask of steely determination. His voice thundered across the mountains as he cried, "Typhon, I cast down the Titans. I shall cast you down as well." And with that, he launched his first bolt, a searing arc of lightning that split the sky, crashing down upon Typhon's massive chest. But Typhon merely laughed, each of his heads mocking the king of the gods in a discordant symphony. He brushed away the attack as if it were a mosquito, roaring, "I am the storm that will rip Olympus from the sky." Undeterred, Athena stepped forward, her voice calm but her gaze fierce. "Typhon," she said, "the strength of your muscle cannot match the sharpness of wisdom." With a flick of her wrist, she cast her spear, the tip gleaming as it shot toward Typhon's middle head. The spear hit its mark, but instead of piercing, it ricocheted, splintering as it struck his thick scales. The creature's laughter grew louder, echoing off the mountains as if the very earth were mocking them. Ares couldn't bear it any longer. Gripping his sword, he charged headlong toward Typhon with the full brute force of war in his step. The god of war swung with all his might, a strike aimed at Typhon's massive legs, but as Ares' blade struck, Typhon's serpent coils simply unwrapped and swiped him aside. Ares was sent flying, landing with an unceremonious thud, bruised and snarling. Poseidon, taking his cue, stepped forward and raised his trident, summoning the might of the ocean. With a grand sweep of his hand, he commanded tidal waves to rise and crash into Typhon's form, drenching the monster in icy seawater. "How's that for a splash?" Poseidon shouted with a grin. But Typhon merely shook off the water, sending a wave of steam and hissing as his fiery breath turned Poseidon's ocean assault into vapor. From above, Apollo and Artemis took their positions, each with their bows drawn. "Perhaps a little marksmanship will do what brute force could not," Apollo said to his sister with a wry smile. Together, they let fly a volley of golden and silver arrows, each one aimed with godly precision. The arrows soared through the sky like falling stars, each one striking Typhon from different directions. But Typhon only turned his many heads toward them, each face scowling. In one powerful exhale, he breathed a massive wall of fire, scorching the very air and forcing Apollo and Artemis to retreat, shielding themselves against the monstrous heat. Meanwhile, Hermes darted around the battlefield, an almost invisible blur, dodging Typhon's every strike. At one point, he even sped past Typhon's massive arm, giving it a cheeky slap before speeding out of reach. You missed me, he taunted, but Typhon's laughter only grew darker, his eyes narrowing as he anticipated Hermes' next move. Hera, watching all of this with a fierce maternal fury, raised her scepter and spoke a word of power. "Typhon, your strength is brute. The gods are more than muscle," she declared, as an aura of protection enveloped her family. But even her enchantments wavered as Typhon let out a roar, the sheer force of his voice sending shockwaves that cracked Olympus' ancient stones. It was then that Zeus knew they needed a different plan. With a brief, meaningful glance, he signaled Hermes and Pan, who had been watching from the sidelines, eyes wide with awe and horror. Pan, ever the clever and wild god, nodded and took a deep breath. Then, with a shout that split the air, he let out his panic scream, an ear-piercing cry that had been known to send entire armies fleeing. The scream echoed across the battlefield, startling Typhon just enough for Hermes to swoop down and snatch Zeus's fallen thunderbolts. Hermes, with all his speed and dexterity, returned the thunderbolts to Zeus's hands, and with his power restored, Zeus rose again. Now his face was no longer merely determined, it was fierce, filled with the intensity of a ruler who knew his legacy hung in the balance. With a renewed vigor, Zeus hurled thunderbolt after thunderbolt, each strike charged with the fury of the heavens. One by one, Typhon's heads began to recoil, his cries of mockery replaced by growls of pain. The battlefield grew brighter as each bolt connected, lighting up the scene like a celestial fireworks show. Finally, with one last colossal bolt, Zeus summoned all his power, channeling the very essence of the heavens into a single strike. The sky seemed to pause, as if even time itself held its breath before Zeus hurled the bolt with all his might. It struck Typhon square in the chest, the impact resounding like the crash of worlds. Typhon's monstrous form staggered, his head shrieking in unison as the light of the thunderbolt spread through him, searing each part of his towering body. The earth split open beneath Typhon's feet, and with a final, anguished scream, the monstrous form was cast down into a deep chasm, his body swallowed by the earth itself. Mount Etna, a volcano rising over the chasm, formed above him, sealing him beneath the ground. Even buried, Typhon's rage continued to rumble, causing eruptions and earthquakes as his fury simmered within. In the aftermath, the gods stood together atop Olympus, their faces reflecting relief, exhaustion, and awe. Ares grumbled about wanting a proper fight, muttering about how he'd barely warmed up before the battle turned chaotic. Athena, sharp-eyed and ever strategic, ignored her brother's complaints as she assessed the scorched landscape below, studying every detail of Typhon's retreat with a critical eye. Zeus, still gripping his thunderbolt with a forceful grasp, looked over his shoulder at his siblings and children. This was only the beginning, he declared, his voice resonating across the peaks of Olympus. Typhon's fury may have been subdued, but it will be centuries before the land recovers fully. Hera stepped forward, her gaze steely as she placed a hand on Zeus's shoulder. Then we must fortify ourselves. This victory may have spared Olympus today, but the world will know Typhon's wrath in new ways. His essence is woven into the earth's very bones now. He won't be forgotten. As she spoke, the ground beneath them shuddered faintly. Hades, his dark cloak trailing over the ground like shadows pooling at twilight, narrowed his eyes. We cannot trust that Typhon is truly defeated, he warned. Creatures born of rage and chaos do not die as mortals do. He may yet rise, or perhaps his power will seep into the land, stirring other forces to anger. Poseidon, leaning on his trident, nodded in agreement. If Typhon's essence lingers in the earth, the seas will feel it too. The tides may rise wilder, and storms more fierce. We must be prepared for what's to come. From the back of the gathered gods, Hermes stepped forward, his winged sandals scarcely touching the ground as he moved. Then let me carry word to the mortals, he offered. They will need guidance to understand the changes that may come. Storms, tremors, and shadows unlike any before. We cannot leave them defenseless. Zeus agreed, and with a gesture, he sent Hermes speeding across the skies. As Hermes disappeared into the horizon, the remaining gods began a solemn discussion about their defenses. They decided to create hidden sanctuaries throughout the world, places that would channel their powers to protect against any reawakening of Typhon's rage. But as they prepared, Typhon's defeated form, buried deep in the earth, pulsed with a faint, dark energy. Unbeknownst to the gods, his fury and hatred seeped through the layers of soil and rock, merging with the primordial forces of nature. In quiet valleys, strange winds began to blow. Deep in the forests, ancient trees whispered of unrest. Thus, while Olympus celebrated its victory, the seeds of a new chaos were already sown, and the gods, though vigilant, could not foresee every shadow in the lands below. Typhon's spirit would lie in wait, biding its time, until a day came when mortal and god alike would feel the resurgence of his wrath. And so, the world braced itself for an era of unknown battles, as Typhon's legacy, hidden and unforgotten, lurked beneath the earth, an ever-present reminder that even gods could never truly destroy chaos itself.